We're rolling.
Welcome to the House Dudes podcast, where we invite you to follow us on our journey towards financial freedom using the power of real estate. I'm Jack Haas.
And I'm Josh Koth. Here at House Dudes, we believe in a couple key principles. Number one, the best way to retain information is by teaching it to others. And number two, a rising tide lifts all boats. We're not competitors, we're a community. So let's get into some real estate investing.
You mentioned earlier that you have to be okay with people doing it 80% of your level. That 20% seems to be a big chasm, is pretty significant. Where that's another mindset thing. We talk about it all the time that people just don't care as much as you do. Would you say that that's part of that culture you were talking about before?
It is huge. I devoted an entire section of my book. Nobody will care about your business like you do, and they can care about it quite a bit. I have some folks in my company that I always say I think they would run through a brick wall to do anything for the company, but they just don't care as much as you do. And so, great example of this. I hired someone in my company, the first person I hired actually. Which is too bad for her because I wasn't great at hiring and managing yet, but she was great. And I brought her in and I essentially downloaded everything I was doing to her so that I could work on growth and talking to investors and kind of doing some things that was not getting done as well. And she took over all my day-to-day activities, right? And things were starting to fall through the cracks and I was getting frustrated. And I don't want to use her name, but I said, listen, what's happening? Like, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? And she said, I literally fall asleep on my keyboard of my computer every night. I work from the time I wake up until the time I go to bed, and I'm trying, but I'm literally falling asleep on my computer. And I realized I'm incentivized differently than she is, right? She's getting paid a wage. I'm building a company, and I know where I'm trying to go, and I'm the owner. So you're always going to have more capacity or at least more desire, like to work on a Sunday or to work at 8 o'clock at night. You can't expect that from people, even if they love your company and they're good people and they're hard workers. Like, an entrepreneur will do things that they can't necessarily expect their workers to do because they are just incentivized differently. It's not their company. They don't have this vision of like, I'm going to be a $10 million company. And they're not sharing in that the way you are. So you can't expect that from them. And I burned her out and she ended up leaving. And it's too bad. I still regret it because she was my first hire and she was fantastic. She was great at what she did, but I burned her out before I realized what was exactly happening, and she moved on and she's happy and she's great. I still know what she's up to and we communicate a little bit, but I just expected her to do exactly what I did. And that was unfair and unrealistic. So yeah, people just, and don't think it means they don't care. They do care. There's some folks in my company that they're so dedicated. It's like really humbling how much they care, but they still don't care like I do. And I can't expect them to. You really shouldn't.
Right. So, one of the things that we were going to talk about a little bit is regarding, we're going to change the subject just a little bit. And I wanted to talk about social media, and we probably can tie that into how you're finding some of these people. But how do you think, you mentioned being on and talking with Gary Vee a while back, and you had a topic regarding the, Agent 2021 conference.
Yep.
The future of social media and real estate. We're COVID-19 is becoming has taken over all of our lives.
Yeah. Social
media, the Zoom thing, we could probably spend a whole episode on that. But totally. How do you see the social media changing the landscape here?
It's changing the landscape the same way that all online stuff is, and it's different. Social media is different. It's its own animal. But what we're seeing is, and what we're going to continue to see, 20 years ago, before social media, when it came to like finding deals and things, it was like MLS, direct mail, stuff like that, right? Very traditional means. And that stuff still works. But sounds a little morbid, but as the baby boomers kind of move on and some folks sort of start aging a little bit more, people who have had the internet and computers in their life longer are more comfortable with getting online to find solutions to problems. They're not waiting for the mail to come to find out who they should bank with and who they should, order pizza from and all this stuff. And it's same with houses. And so what we're finding is, I think personally, I think the real estate industry suffers a little bit from being slightly behind the times. There are industries that have embraced social media and the internet a little more than real estate investors have traditionally. But I think we're starting to catch up now, and we're understanding that we need to be where people are. And more, even I tend to, our demographic and our company, people that we buy houses from, and we buy houses mostly direct from the homeowners, direct to sellers. If I just looked at the data and showed you the data, like the data it is what it is. It's just facts. Most of the people that we buy houses from are older. They're not younger. But older folks, and I say older, it's relative, right? So I'm saying the people that we buy houses from are typically over the age of 50, and a lot of times over the age of 60, but they're certainly over the age of 50. They are, over the last decade, more and more and more on Facebook, for example, right? People's grandmothers are now on Facebook because they want to see their grandkids and their kids and things like that. So more and more social media, and I'll use Facebook because I don't think you're necessarily older generations are on TikTok yet. It's like they haven't caught up to that. It's more of a kids thing right now. I think it will be, but it isn't. But Facebook is so mainstream. As a matter of fact, young people have sort of gotten off of Facebook a lot of times because their parents and their grandparents are on it. It's kind of a bummer when you're trying to do something cool and your parents and grandparents are there. But that's where people are. So doing Facebook advertising specifically to find homeowners or sellers who are in distress or need to sell their house has become way, way, way more utilized, and people are finding deals on Facebook. Matter of fact, a lot cheaper than they're finding them through direct mail, because direct mail can get very expensive. It's, there's a lot of, at one point, we don't send quite this much now, but at one point last year, we were up to 65,000 mail pieces a month, right? Just to get 12 deals or 15 deals. Like, do the math. There's a lot of stuff that didn't get answered. A lot of people who didn't call us when they got something in the mail. But Facebook is still inexpensive enough that the ROI is really off the charts. You getting a deal on Facebook is so much more effective. And so because of that, and 5 years ago, for those of you who maybe haven't been around in real estate so long, 5 years ago, a good response rate for direct mail was 2 or 3%. Like, it was possible. And then it got down to like 1.5%. And it's like, okay, not bad. Most people now that I talk to, and I'm surrounded by hundreds of real estate investors from all over the country in our mastermind, are getting anywhere from 0.3 to maybe 0.8 or even maybe touching 1%. 1% is amazingly good, but like 0.5%, it's pretty common now for a response for direct mail. So the cost, the effectiveness of it has just dramatically taken a hit. So we're looking for other things that we can do. And Facebook is one. Pay-per-click, Google AdWords for sure still works. In my business right now, that's probably the most effective thing I'm doing is pay-per-click. Now, we're in the middle of the coronavirus, the pandemic, so there's a lot more people sitting at home surfing the net, and it's probably helping those numbers a little bit. But the reality is that generation is aging, and more people are going to Google, Facebook, Instagram, I think, is something else that's certainly, when you're looking for like investors and things like that, doing Instagram posts and showing what you're doing is huge. But yeah, I think social media, it's not going to become less effective. It will only become more effective as that generation starts aging. And then the reason why I buy houses more from people who are a little bit older is because younger people just haven't hit the life events and gotten into a position where they really need to sell or they have a distressed property. So it's usually the older generation. And as that generation ages, they're more and more used to going on social media to find things. And that's where they're going to look for things.
Sure. Have you run into, like, I've run into it a couple times. This is what spurs the question is, and maybe it's the way I'm wording the ad or something in Facebook where, it gets flagged. Is there, because it is seen as predatory or what have you, is there certain strategies that you've found that work better than others regarding that?
I do. I really believe, and this kind of goes back to the Gary Vee thing a little bit. I'm a big fan of telling stories. and not asking for something and not asking like, hey, the thing is when we send out direct mail, especially postcards, and I say me, I don't mean me, I mean our industry, and I've done it too. It's a lot of like, hey, I'll buy your house for cash, no repairs, sell quickly at your own, blah, 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 all this stuff, no inspections. When you can, but it's less effective. And you're right. Things are getting flagged on Facebook when you're using that sort of aggressive approach. But I think having a storytelling approach is much more effective. Showing someone having sold their house, kind of moving on, telling a story about someone who was released of the burden of this house with a lot of deferred maintenance, and how they were able to take the money they made from that and move on to a better point in their life and kind of move on to the next phase. Like telling those stories and evoking emotion is everything in social media, like everything. If you're just like, I want to buy your house, sell to me, I buy houses every day, blah, 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 I'll do it. Like that's a turnoff. Like people want to have an emotion evoked in them. And if you can tell them a story that is similar to their story, you're going to have a lot more, it's going to have a lot more of an impact, and it's going to be a lot more successful than just coming at them with what you want from them. It's really, you have to talk to the person, and you have to tell stories are everything in marketing, in my opinion.
Do you keep it to a certain length then? Like regarding that? I mean, it sounds like it's a video.
Yeah, it's usually a multi-step approach, right? So in Facebook, you can look at people who are watching the video for a certain length of time. You can redirect your marketing to them for the next video. So it's usually a series of like very short videos of folks, moving on or having that epiphany that they need to sell, and this is why they're selling. It's the house is too big for us. Our kids have moved on, and they're short-ish, under 5 minutes for sure, but it's not even about them necessarily watching all 5 minutes. You want them to watch to a certain point. Maybe they're watching half of it or most 3/4 of it. And if they do that, you go, okay, good. So short attention spans, we know that, but they watched most of it or even all of it. So now we're gonna put this video in front of them, and it's you're telling them a story through a series of videos. You're not trying to do it all in one video. It's not a half an hour documentary about this couple. It's like it's short little bits. Like, hey, we need to sell our house. Like, we're never going to sell this through a realtor. We need a new roof, like whatever the case, right? We don't have the money. And then the next video is about how they are looking and realtors are turning them down or whatever. And then you kind of walk them through this in a series of videos. And not everyone gets through them all. Some people start it, they go, they're not interested. But the folks who are watching and watching good chunks of this, you sort of step them through that process. And it's a longer approach. Everybody wants this instant gratification, like, I want to buy your house, call me now, and they want the phone to ring and you buy their house.
Right.
The reality is a lot of sales, even in-person sales, but certainly online, it's a multi-step process.
No, I like your approach, especially because, rapport is such a big aspect of what we do. And you're kind of planting those seeds up front. I mean, that's something that's always been a little bit of a rub for me regarding the current marketing efforts that everybody does. It's very, like you said, very aggressive. We see cash for houses and bandit signs and everything all the time. But when everybody's doing that, the population's getting desensitized to that as well. And it doesn't come off as genuine. I mean, it's
very, again, you brought up Gary Vee, but this is kind of where I got this concept. It's they think very transactionally, and everything to them is like, it's a transaction, right? It's not. It's rapport. You're building a relationship with these folks. You're not asking them to buy a $3 widget. If you're selling a $3 widget, you probably can do that in one step. You can't really afford to have multi-step approach. It's ridiculous. You're selling a $3 widget, but you're asking to do a tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollar transaction with someone and to trust you. How do you do that? By screaming in bold, yellow background, black bold letters, we buy houses, for cash, fast. Like, it'll work for some people. It does. It works on some level, or no one would do it. But it's not the long game for sure. It's very transactional. And as I'm sure in real estate, a lot of the success, or a good chunk of it, is referrals, right? So we want people to like go, hey, I just saw this great thing on Facebook. I've been following this video series. Like, it's not for me necessarily, but I know my friend really is trying to sell their house and these guys look great, but then the company that's screaming at them, like, who's going to refer that? Who wants to refer that? So you'll get maybe to someone who's desperate that moment. You'll catch them at the right time and they'll call you and maybe it works out, but you're not going to get the referrals that you would get if you took a little bit more of a relationship-based approach.
Yeah. And it's the relation-based approach where we've found our biggest opportunities and biggest deals. I mean, in some of those cases, you're building a rapport, and it takes. People think it's quick transactions, but it isn't uncommon for me to go into a house and I'm spending a couple hours, if not longer, because you're asking a few questions and they're admitting things verbally for the first time. You're almost they haven't admitted it to themselves. I mean, it becomes a pretty emotional situation.
Well, the biggest mistake I think people make, new investors, when they're in a home and they're trying to get under contract, is to walk in the house and immediately and exclusively be thinking about the contract and how are they going to buy it and how much are they going to offer and what's that negotiation going to look like. I tell people all the time, if you're in the house for an hour and you even bring up the price that maybe they will, but if you bring up the price or start any level of negotiation before the last 10 or 15 minutes, like, you've screwed up. You should be sitting and listening. And by the way, man, I'm big on this and I'm going to virtually pound this into the head of the people listening. The key here is don't listen and pretend to empathize. Like, listen and really try to help them solve their problems. Like, if you really truly come from a position of trying to solve problems, a lot of times you'll find the price of the house, especially at the point that you're at, right? They got your mail or they saw you on Facebook or whatever, and you're in their house, right? You've gotten that far. If you think that the price that you buy it for is the number one and only concern that they have and the only thing you can help them with, you're crazy. There's something else happening in their life that they need you to resolve or help them get through. The sale of the house will help facilitate that, but it's not necessarily, they're not always looking for top dollar. They're not, right? Mm-hmm. So people ask me all the time, how do you buy houses for 50 cents on the dollar or 40 cents on the dollar? Like, who would do that? I go, well, there's a million reasons why, but that's what you have to find out. That's your job when you go in there, is like, figure out what their pain points are, figure out how you can alleviate or solve those pain points. And then, oh, by the way, buy their house, right? And if you can solve those problems for most people who we buy from, the purchase price is secondary to all the other problems that I'm solving by buying their house.
Right. I don't want to end this conversation, but I do want to. I probably consumed up so much of your time as it is. If you could give just a couple, like you already said, if you could drill one thing home to new investors, could you give a couple more tips? Like if you could give, like, the first time investor some serious advice. Yeah. He's sitting down across from you over coffee. What are you telling them, like, when they're trying to get out of analysis paralysis? Yep,
I totally can, because I've sat across from people and had this conversation many times. So the number one thing I would tell them, and listen, we talked about this, everybody wants the silver bullet, everybody wants the software or the postcard that just crushes, and that's fine. But here's the thing, and I'll be a little bit vulnerable here for a second. I first got the bug, a real estate bug, and decided I really want to be a real estate investor. I decided that in 2003. Mm-hmm. I bought my first house in 2008. Okay. I know what it means to be frozen by paralysis analysis, fears, anxieties, what ifs. I need to learn more. I don't know enough. And it froze me, right? I wish I had those years back to start earlier. Now, a lot of people got crushed in 2008, so probably a little silver lining that I started then. But the reality is, I tell people, number one, just start, right? It's self-serving. I name my podcast that. I get it, but that's why I did it. That's how important I think it is. People need to get out there and to start. We talked about it earlier. You do that first deal, it'll answer 95% of the questions that you're struggling with, right? So get out there and get started. Make offers. Start the process, right? That's number one. Number two, absolutely look for mentorship or from help. You don't have to necessarily pay for it, certainly right off the bat. Find someone who's farther along than you are. They don't have to be doing 100 houses a year. You're doing 0. Find someone who did 5 houses last year and talk to them, take them out to coffee, try to be of service to them. And that's the other thing. When you're looking for a mentor, especially early on, when you have no experience in the industry, try to figure out what you bring to someone and invite that person out for coffee and start offering ways that you could be of service to them in exchange for them giving you their time to talk about the industry with you and help you with your journey. Figure out a way that you can help them. I get this all the time. I'm sure that you do. People reaching out of the blue. I don't know them from Adam, and they immediately are asking me for a lot of stuff. Like, they wanna, can you give me this? Send me this. Can you evaluate this deal? Blah, blah, blah. Do you have money you can loan? Like, they come at me asking, and honestly, I've gotten to the point where I barely respond now when I get those because it's just so aggressive and so ugly. But I also have people who reach out and say, I'd like to take you out for coffee. Here's what I do. I'm really great at this. Maybe I could help you by offering my services here, or whatever the case may be. Even if they're trying to be of help or offer something, I will give them my time much more readily than I will someone who just kind of grossly comes at me with a bunch of, this is what I need from you kind of a thing. So be of service. Find a mentor or a mastermind or somebody people you can surround yourself with, because it will be hard in the beginning. So if you can surround yourself with people who are having some level of success and kind of moving forward, it'll encourage you. It'll give you that proof that we talked about. So just start, find a mentor, and then really get out of your own way. Like, especially once you start getting a little bit of success, a little bit of traction, try to find out where you are not great and get some help in that area. And I'm not saying day 1 or day 2, but realize if you want this to not become a job, you have to build a team. And I'm not saying pay people, but build a team could be find a great realtor that you can work with, find a great contractor that you can work, like really be conscious of building a team of people that are helping you move forward and be successful. You can't do it all yourself forever. You should not be painting houses. You should not be tiling your own floors, in my opinion. That's not, unless you're just great at that. But even then, you're gonna have a scale problem, right? So just be aware you can't do everything day to day. You need to build that team earlier than later.
So, well, Mike, you obviously have a lot of stuff to share. So, where can they get your book? Where can they reach you? Where can they extend this conversation with you directly if they could?
Okay, awesome. Thank you for that. So the book is available June 1st, 2020. So whenever you're listening to this, if it's past June 1st, you can find it on Amazon. Just search for Level Jumping by Mike Simmons, and it's how I took my company to over $1 million in gross profits in less than 12 months. So you can find that on Amazon after June 1st. And then if you want to get a hold of me, you can find me at mike@juststartrealestate.com. And then juststartrealestate.com, or I'm sorry, Just Start Real Estate is my podcast. So you can find me on Apple, iTunes, Stitcher, anywhere that you listen to podcasts. You can find me at Just Start Real Estate.
Yep, and I will make sure to include all of those links in the show notes. I can't thank you enough, and I appreciate you giving me some extended time here. I told you it was going to be 20, 30 minutes, and we're closing in probably closer to an hour.
I love it. I love it.
I really appreciate it, and I hope we can chat again sometime.
Sure thing, man. Love it. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
We've put a lot of effort into providing useful content, and if you found value in the show and have any interest in supporting us with a small donation, head over to patreon.com/housedudes.
And if you have any thoughts or questions, shoot us an email at info@housedudes.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter @housedudes. And if you like what you're hearing, head over to iTunes, subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. It really helps other investors out there find the show.
And remember, massive positive impact requires
massive positive action. We'll see you next time. This episode was brought to you by HouseDudes.com. Do you have time to actively manage flipping and rentals yourself? If so, go for it. If you live in a market that won't cash flow or don't have the time to do all the work, are you just out of luck? If there was a way to participate more passively, would that appeal to you? I'm sure you have questions about how the process works and what to do next. If that's the case, fill out the form on housedudes.com/investors, and we'll reach out to see if you are a good fit for our business. This is first come, first serve, and we will have to stop taking applications when our goals are met. See you at housedudes.com/investors.
I don't like to tell a man what to do with his money, but if you ain't investing in property, then you're dumber than a dummy.
I'm not dumb. I'm smart.
Well, buy property. That's my advice.